This video shows how to use Shotcut to extract portions of a video clip. I have on my desktop two sample clips. The one named Countdown is a simple countdown. The other, named Sony, is a more elaborate collection of outdoor scenes. Let's first extract a segment from the Countdown clip. To launch Shotcut, I'll click the Start button at the bottom left of the Windows desktop. If Shotcut automatically appears in the Start menu, I'll click on it to launch the program. If I don't see it, I'll type SHOTCUT, all one word, and then click on Shotcut when it appears. After the program launches, I'll click the Open File button on the left of the Shotcut button bar. Since the countdown video is on my desktop, I'll click the desktop link in the navigation pane on the left. Then, in the larger panel to the right, I'll scroll up and down through the contents of my desktop until I find the file named Countdown. I'll double-click on it to open it in Shotcut. Notice that the video automatically starts to play. The countdown begins at 8, and when we hit 2, the screen turns black. Let's say I'd like to extract the segment between 6 and 4. I'm not interested in anything before 6. I'm not interested in anything after 4. I just want every frame of the 6s, every frame of the 5s, and every frame of the 4s. To go back to the very first frame of the video, I'll tap the Home key on my keyboard. Then I'll tap the space bar to begin playback, and when I reach the 6s, I'll tap it again to pause. Due to my slow reaction time, I know that's not the first frame of the 6s. To go back frame by frame, I'll tap the left arrow key. Although I'm fairly certain that's the first frame of the 6s, I'll tap the left arrow key one more time and hopefully see the last frame of the 7s. Yes, I was in the right spot, so I'll go forward now one frame by tapping the right arrow key. Now that I know that's the first frame of the 6s, I'll mark it by tapping the letter I on my keyboard. That's the in point. Next, I'll resume playback by tapping the space bar, and when I reach the 4s, I'll pause by tapping it again. I'm pretty sure that's not the last frame of the 4s, so I'll tap the right arrow key to move forward frame by frame. I went too far. That's the first frame of the 3s. I'll go back one frame by tapping the left arrow key. Now that I know that's the last frame of the 4s, I'll tap the letter O on my keyboard to mark it as the out point. If you look immediately below the playback window on the timeline, you'll notice that the segment between 6 and 4 is shaded. Whatever is done next in Shotcut will be done only to that selected area. By the way, you can change your mind as many times as you like and press I or O. Whichever I and O was pressed last will be the one Shotcut remembers. If you don't mark off a segment with I and O, Shotcut assumes you want to operate on the entire video. Now that I have the desired segment selected, all I need to do is export it as a brand new file. To do that, I'll click the Export button on the right of the Shotcut button bar. Once the export window opens, we see the properties of the video file we'll be creating. Regardless of the format of the original video file, Shotcut will automatically default to making an MP4 file from it. We can normally leave that alone because MP4 files are one of the allowable edTPA file types, and they almost always play quite well on both the Mac and PC platforms. If we look a little further down the export window, we see the resolution, aspect ratio, and frame rate of the video file we'll be creating. They match the resolution, aspect ratio, and frame rate of the original video file. Again, unless we have a very good reason to change these settings, we should leave them alone. All we normally have to do is go to the bottom left of the export window and click the Export File button. I'm asked to decide where I'd like to save the video file I'm creating and what I'd like to call it. I think I'll save my video to the desktop, so I'll scroll up to the top of the navigation pane on the left and click the desktop link as my destination. Then, in the file name field near the bottom, I'll provide a meaningful file name. I think I'll call mine just 6 through 4. Although Shotcut is supposed to automatically append the extension at the end of the file name, I like to type it in manually. Since I'm creating an MP4 file, I'll type .mp4 at the end of the file name. If you're creating a video in another file format, be sure to provide the appropriate extension. Then all I have to do is click the Save button at the bottom. How long the save process takes depends on the complexity of the job, the size of the original video, and the speed of my computer. How do you know when the process has completed? Look at the Jobs panel at the far right of Shotcut. When you see the word Done, you know the process has completed. If you see a percentage value slowly increasing toward 100, you must wait. Wait until you see Done in the Jobs window. Then and only then has Shotcut finished doing everything it needs to do. It's a good idea to check my work, so I'll click the Open File button on the left of the Shotcut button bar. Once again, scroll up and down through the contents of my desktop, and this time double-click on the file I just made, just 6 through 4.mp4. If you see a message asking you whether you'd want to save the project file, always answer no to that. Please do not confuse a project file for a video. A project file is not a video. It is simply a record of all the steps you followed to make the video. That sometimes comes in handy if people are performing elaborate procedures that need to be repeated over and over again. Since the procedures we're performing are very simple, we do not need to save a written record of all the steps. So when you're asked if you want to save the project file, answer no to that. We've had success. We see only the portion of the video we'd like to extract. Now let's try another example. After once again clicking the Open File button on the left of the Shotcut button bar, I'll scroll up and down through the contents of my desktop and this time double-click on the file named Sony. The Sony video is a much longer clip featuring some outdoor scenes. I'm interested in extracting the segment with the Squirrel. One way to proceed would be to simply allow the video to play and tap the I and O keys at the appropriate times before I perform the export procedure. Unfortunately, with a lengthy clip such as this, the procedure could take a long time. A more expedient method would be to first pause playback by tapping the space bar and then do one of the following. I could either left-click on the playhead below the playback window and drag it from left to right along the timeline, or without clicking, I could hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and roll my mouse from left to right across the playback window. Either technique will allow me to rapidly traverse a video in a matter of seconds. There's the Squirrel. Apparently, it's sandwiched in between two other clips that both feature water. I'll get as close as I can to the beginning of the squirrel segment, and then, depending on the technique I'm using, either release the left mouse button or let up on the shift key. Then I'll use the left and right arrow keys to precisely locate the first frame of the squirrel. There it is. I'll tap the letter I to mark that as the endpoint. Then I'll begin playback again by tapping the space bar. And when I see the end of the squirrel segment, I'll tap the space bar a second time. Next, I'll use the left and right arrow keys, just as before, to this time locate the end of the squirrel segment. There it is. So I'll tap the letter O on my keyboard to mark that as the out point. After I've verified that the segment of interest is highlighted on the timeline, I'll go to the bottom left of the export window, which is still open from the previous export procedure, and click on the Export File button. I'll save the video to my desktop, and I'll call it Squirrel.mp4, or whatever file type I'm using. I'll click the Save button at the bottom. Then I'll look in the Jobs window off to the right and wait for the word Done to appear opposite the job name. I'll double-check my work by clicking the Open File button on the left of the Shotcut button bar. Locate the file named Squirrel and double-click on it. Once again, if I'm asked whether I want to save the project file, I'll answer no to that. Just as before with the countdown video, I was able to extract only the segment of interest.